Hello! I'm going to show you how to make a super fun and colourful easy graduation cake. And the best part, you don't need any fancy tools. This design uses homemade cake stencils, bright buttercream, and just a little bit of patience. It's absolutely perfect for a preschool graduation, an end-of-year party, or really any joyful celebration. Let's get started. First, bake your cake using whatever flavour you like. This is my very vanilla cake recipe, adding sprinkles into the batter for fun, colourful slices. Assemble your cake by layering the cake layers and filling. I'm using my 4-minute buttercream for the filling and frosting here because it's easy to make and tastes amazing. And it works like magic for this design. You will need to use a crusting buttercream like this for the frosting, and all that means is that the buttercream gets firm when it sets, which makes it possible to add the colourful buttercream silhouette cake design later. This is called a crumb coat, and it's a very thin layer of frosting that completely covers the cake to trap any loose crumbs. It doesn't need to be perfectly smooth, it just needs to cover up all of the naked cake. So after you've scraped around the cake once or twice using a cake comb or icing smoother or frosting scraper, and leveled off the top using an offset spatula or angled palette knife, put this into the fridge for about 30 minutes to set. Meanwhile, tint the buttercream for your final layer of frosting. I'm using neon blue gel food colouring. When the crumb coat has set, so it's firm to the touch, not sticky, use this to frost your cake. I like to start with the top, spreading it out to the sides, and then smoothing it by holding my offset spatula at a 45-degree angle while I spin the cake until it's smooth. For the sides, spread the buttercream so that it sticks up above the top edge, and this will give you nice sharp angles later. And after covering the whole cake, scrape around a few times with a cake comb. This one is plastic, and you can see this trail it's leaving around the middle of the cake, and that's because the cake comb is dinged from dropping it or knocking it at some point. I prefer using a metal cake comb because the material is much stronger, so it doesn't get dinged as easily. Another reason I love using metal is that you can heat the edge using a hairdryer or a blowtorch or hot water, and then rub it with a towel or paper towel until it's warm, not hot. And then scrape around the cake and you'll leave super smooth frosting behind. For the top edge, swipe sideways with your offset spatula or angled palette knife, making sure you're only pushing sideways, not down at all, because that will cause a bulge around the rim of the cake. Now this cake needs to go into the fridge for at least an hour, or ideally overnight. Cover any leftover buttercream with cling film or saran wrap so it doesn't dry out and crust, and you'll be able to retint this for the decorations later. While the cake is in the fridge, make some DIY cake stencils. These are so easy to make but so effective. Search online for celebrating children silhouettes and print out a few on a piece of paper. Black and white is fine. Cut pieces out of parchment or wax paper so that there's about 1 inch of paper surrounding each figure. Then use a pencil to trace over each figure along the outline, and keep in mind that the more detailed this outline is, the neater your final shape will be. So take the time to follow all of the little details like creases in clothing and fingertips. You can reuse these stencils, but I actually find it's quicker to just make one for every figure you want to put on the cake. After you've traced around them, use scissors to cut them out by snipping into the middle of each child, that sounds crazy, and poking a scissor blade through and then cutting around the outline. And again, the neater you do this, the neater the edges of your design will be. While your cake is chilling, tint your buttercream colours. I've made 6, but quick tip, instead of using lots of little bowls, which will take forever to clean, mixing the coloured buttercream in a cupcake pan is a great time-saving idea. Once the frosting on your cake is really firm, wrap a stencil around it to position the figure where you want it to be, and spread buttercream to cover it. Use your left or non-dominant hand to press the stencil firmly against the cake, and then spread the buttercream from the edges to the middle of the shape. If you push in the other direction, you can force buttercream underneath the stencil and smudge the design. Scrape over the stencil a few times with a small offset spatula or angled palette knife to leave a thin, smooth layer of buttercream behind. Then gently peel the stencil away from the cake. If there are any smudges on the cake, use a toothpick to gently scrape them off. Since the frosted cake is cold and firm, you won't damage it as you scrape. Repeat with the rest of your stencils, but space these far enough apart so that each stencil doesn't touch any of the previous buttercream figures, otherwise the stencil will damage it. We'll fill in all of the gaps on the cake later. Once you've worked your way around the cake, pop it back into the fridge for at least 30 minutes to set this first part of the design before continuing. If you want to scrape the buttercream off your stencils and use them again, now's the time to do that. When you take your cake out of the fridge, you can place the stencils in between the figures you've already stenciled onto the cake. It's fine if the stencil touches that buttercream now, because it's cold and firm. I'm trying to space these evenly around the cake, but if you want to overlap them, you can. Just make sure none of the stencils touch any buttercream that hasn't set yet. That might mean putting the cake back into the fridge again before finishing up with the final stencils. This is such a fun and colourful design, perfect for a graduation or even for back to school. Subscribe to my channel for more cake decorating techniques that don't require a lot of fancy tools, and visit my cake school for online courses and memberships, teaching hundreds of cake decorating techniques and designs. Thanks for watching.